I'm glad to be here. Right now, I'm currently missing the Detroit Lions Green Bay Packer game, which has shed about as much blood as the war on drugs. Yeah, so I guess, real quick, we've talked a lot about the war on drugs in America. I'll just recap a few things, obviously, not going into Nixon. Let me just bring it down to Michigan, right? The same thing that's happening in America all over is happening in Michigan, right? It's not a war on drugs, it's a war on people, all right? So you look at Michigan has 9.8 million people in it, okay? It has 45,000 of those people are incarcerated in state prisons in the state. Out of that, 45% of them are African Americans, but African Americans only make up 19% of the total population, so you can see how much they target. This is the same in every city. Now, I live in Grand Rapids, but I work between Detroit and Grand Rapids, which is the first and the second largest cities in Michigan, and are not shy to the effects of the war on drugs. I myself grew up in an inner city neighborhood where drug dealing was very prevalent. I've lost friends who were murdered in the streets. People continue to be murdered in my neighborhood. Right now in my city, we have 36 unsolved murders this year, and about 20 of them are probably drug related. So, how did I get into it? You know, I didn't start out doing cannabis work or anything like that. I started out working for the Democratic Party in my county in Michigan. I worked on LGBT rights, transit, different politicians, but it was always in the back of my head. Obviously, when I came out of the Iraq War. I served in Iraq, I served in Somalia, and I served in Kosovo. So when I got out, I had spent almost, out of my 5 years of the service, I had spent almost 3 years in a constant combat zone. And when I got out, there was never any kind of there was no psychological evaluation. I was basically pulled out of a hole in Iraq and told that I could finally go home. So I did. And like a lot of guys, it was very hard for me to come home to my childhood bedroom, and I'm still wearing the same stuff I wore in high school, you know? Walking around with like FUBU shirts on when I'm 25 years old. But everything, you know, I had been stuck in time. Well, you know, soldiers had started using marijuana. I started using marijuana, but back then you didn't talk about it. Because using marijuana was bad. Now it's okay if you want to drink yourself to death. It's okay if you want to drink till you off yourself, which happens a lot with soldiers in America. But you know, use marijuana, you're a loser. But I realized that it was becoming a big deal. And at the time I was in college, and I led a lot of successful campaigns. And so I talked to some of my friends, I said, why don't we talk about criminalizing marijuana in our city, our second largest city, which is a city of about 250,000 people proper. And it's funny, you know, I live in a very conservative part of the state where people can pretty much say whatever they want, including like putting Hispanics in internment camps and be reelected. They don't care. So no one was trying to help with marijuana legislation. They didn't care. It was funny to me too, because on the Republican and Democrat side, I figured we were going to get some help because we had done a lot of worked before with them, but that never was the case. It just turned out to be some of my college buddies, a few wealthy liberals in our city, and a bunch of high schoolers. And everybody said it wasn't going to work, and they tried to do everything they could not to make it work. But one thing we learned early on, well, we learned two things early on. First, anybody here ever seen The Godfather? Anybody ever watched Godfather? Godfather 3? And he says, you know, I don't need tough guys, I need lawyers. We learned that, right? We need advocates, we do. We don't need tough guys, right? We need lawyers. In America, we have an endless appeal system, and everybody's sued. They'll sue you over hot coffee, they'll sue you over everything. So we knew right away we need to get lawyers. So I was lucky enough to have an uncle who was a lawyer, and I told him, I figured they were going to bring us to the Supreme Court, no matter if we won this or not. He didn't agree with me at the time. But we went and collected our 10,000 signatures. I remember when I first got on too, you know, the war on drugs in America is a very militant war. Okay, there's a few things too, not to get too much into it, but you can understand. So I come from a county called Kent County. It's got 600,000 people. There's a few things that they have there. First, they have a combined narcotics task force of 6 different counties, which make their money off robbing drug dealers. Okay, that's what they make. They don't get a budget from us. They don't get tax money. They make their money. Last year, they made $500,000. Now, if anybody can see, a smart drug dealer in America doesn't keep an Excel spreadsheet of where his cash is going. They don't keep a notebook. So when they come raid you, they take everything you own. Your cars, your baby pictures, everything you have. They liquidate it, and that's how they pay themselves. They become almost like a Wild West posse that goes after the rich. They'll leave the little guys alone. They'll even give incentives to the little guys to stitch out the big guys because they need the money. Another thing that happens, I don't know if any of you have read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, right? That's a big thing. That's actually happening. And one thing that they have is the Edward Byrne grant. Okay, this grant, in 1988, there was a New York police officer named Edward Byrne. And he was watching a house. And some guys came up, one guy knocked on the passenger door, and another guy came up with a .38 special and put 5 in his head. And this was a big deal, right? So then it got blown out of proportion. It went up to Congress. Ronald Reagan used it as his war, as he escalated the war on drugs. Because Nixon started the war on drugs, but Ronald Reagan pushed it. He got the equipment. I mean, they had, battering rams, and this grant was one of them. Even George Bush Sr. during his election carried around that officer's badge to talk about how we needed it. And we needed this grant. All this grant does is pay for training, weapons, and equipment. Doesn't do neighborhood policing, which we know, at least in my community, brings down violence. No, all it does is get you more equipment. So you have two things going for you. First, you rob drug dealers. Second, the number of drug dealers you rob, you get more equipment. You have a lot of positive reinforcements going on. To a police force that doesn't live in the city. Most of the police forces in America do not live in the cities in which they police. The police in my city live 20 miles out. They come in, it's a concrete jungle. You see it. They don't wave, there's neighborhoods in my city where they wave and they're officer friendly. Not my neighborhood. You wave at them, they don't wave back. They sit in their car. And when they raid houses, and they've done this since I was a kid, they come down and we have this humongous armored tank. It's better than what I carried in Iraq. We were taking armor plating from the junkyard and welding it onto our Hummers in the beginning of Iraq so they couldn't shoot through our vehicles. And the police force is better than that, right? They drive this vehicle and they turn red lights on and they intentionally keep the doors of the back open so you can see the whole soldier team in the back. They do this. This is all part of control. So, back to the criminalization, when this was all going on, everybody was very scared. And the lawyer that I got told me, Michael, don't carry any marijuana in your house. I'm very afraid they're going to kick down your door. And this was a very real fear. For 10 months of my life, as a combat veteran, I figured that, and I was afraid because I suffer from PTSD. And I am, even though I have my issues with the Second Amendment, I am a gun owner. I didn't want someone kicking in my door and reflexively I grab a shotgun because I live in a neighborhood that gets broken into a lot and I get murdered. And this is what police forces have done since the beginning of time. They did it to the Black Panther Party. They've done it to every pretty much proactive party we've ever had in America. Police will find a way to assassinate you. So that never happened, thank God, right? I had a lot of sleepless nights. But when we finally got it passed, at a 60% margin in our city, which is one of the highest ever, that we had yeses. I didn't even think it would go that far. Then the prosecutor comes in and said, we're not going to listen to the voters. And it became a huge outcry because they thought they were going to starve us out. They didn't realize that we were having a pro bono lawyer. We passed this thing with $14,000, including $2,000 of my money I had to put up when I was in grad school. And those of you who've been in college, well, they probably pay for college here, but in America, you eat tuna out of a can. Okay, $2,000 was all I had. And I had to do it to keep the lights on. So we put every piece of dime we had in this. We couldn't pay for a lawyer. But they thought we were still doing that, so they brought us to appeals court. Well, first they brought us to circuit court. We won in that. Then they brought us to appeals court. We won in that. Then they tried to bring us to the state Supreme Court. Finally, the state Supreme Court said they weren't going to listen to it. So we learned a few things from this. First, keep lawyers behind you. Now, it might be a little different in this country, but you're still going to have, courts, they're going to try to fight this, right? They're going to do everything they can legally to fight it. Another thing we learned, too, was, and no, I don't want anybody to take offense to this. I got friends of all types. But we told everybody we weren't going to come out in tie-dye t-shirts. We weren't going to come out with marijuana chains on. We weren't going to come out with our pants sagging. We were going to wear ties. We were going to wear suits. We were going to look uniform. Every time they saw us, we utilized some of the things. I had veterans on my staff that we were gonna look presentable. We were gonna look like a well-unified army. So people, you know, like I had beards and stuff, we trimmed them up a little bit. We wanted not to show, because we knew the type of look that everybody wanted to attack in our community, and we decided to show them something different, because they were expecting a bunch of people to come out and, you know, whatever, right, do whatever, look whatever, but we didn't. We came out and we said, no, we're going to be professional about this. And if you want to sue us, we're going to take you to court, we're going to fight you in court. And the last thing we did, which a lot of movements in the country don't do, and I don't understand why in America, stop talking about the plant. No one cares about the plant. We never mentioned marijuana in our campaign, we didn't have it on anything, we just didn't talk about it. We even had a rule that in our mailer, we only mentioned cannabis one time, right? Because we already have some things going on in our country. First, you know, we have prohibition in America for 13 years. We took small-time Italian gangsters and Jewish gangsters and Irish gangsters, and we turned them into the biggest cartels we've ever seen. The blood ran red through Chicago. Even nowadays, when they talk about Chicago with a high murder rate, was never where it was in the 20s. They know this. There's already been things set. So people in the back of their mind, they already know the drug war is real. So, and a lot of times you know that they're going to be no on it. What we saw, though, was America has spent countless billions of dollars through the time I was growing up, basically since the 30s. Basically how it happened was after Prohibition, you know, America always has to find something to hate. So then they were going to hate on the Latino community in Mexico. So they developed the word marijuana to scare everybody. And they used that as it was a you know, a racial movement at the time, and that's why they committed to prohibition at that time. But throughout the decades, they've spent money on commercials, on the DARE programs in our school that, you know, come in and try to talk about, you know, people are going to use drugs. Everybody knows that, right? That's why those programs fail. And I don't know if anybody's ever read High Times by Carl Hart. He's the first African-American tenure professor at Columbia. Him and I, we've talked before. He's come to my city. And, you know, everybody uses, right? Every culture and time has used some type of substance to become inebriated. People right now are becoming inebriated. But just because you're drinking a beer doesn't mean you're going to starve your child tomorrow. There's a difference between use and abuse. And abuse, right, is, you know, it's never been solved in jail cell. It's never been solved in America with that. It needs to be solved through, you know, spiritually, health-wise, psychologically, somewhere along those lines. And so we knew that as long as we pushed all of those issues, talked about all that, we were going to be able to get people to vote on it in our city. And then one thing, and I don't know how people vote here, but in America, most people under 50 don't vote. They don't. I mean, people who helped us with collecting signatures for marijuana did not vote the day we had the vote. They brought people to the polls, and yet they did not vote. I was over at Cannabis Cup. We have this big thing called Cannabis Cup in Michigan every year, and people are selling, you know, marijuana plants and gummies, and it's a humongous concert. Method Man's there, and Snoop Dogg's there. I was up there speaking, and I told people there that they weren't going to vote for marijuana, even though these, you know, hip-hop superstars told them, I told them, the politicians there told them, and they refused to believe that. But I know statistically that 40%, 50% of that crowd will not vote. They'll show up, they'll smoke weed, they'll jump in a mosh pit, they'll wear big, you know, marijuana chains and stuff like that, but they won't vote. When it comes time, they won't. And I don't mind being truthful to people. I don't mind hurting people's feelings. I think that's how we get a little bit of movement going. And so that's one thing we had going for us, you know, that we needed to find a way to tell the 50-year-olds and up who basically live in the suburbs of our community that it doesn't matter if you don't care about, you know, the drug war or anything like that. The fact is, it's coming out of your property taxes. The fact is we have a lot of crimes in my community. When someone pulls over one of us, right, for a little nickel sack of marijuana, that's about an hour and a half the cop takes to go process you. It takes about an hour and a half of paperwork and everything like that, and he's off the street. And our cops get into shootouts, actual firefights with people. So when your officer gets into a firefight and you're busy with some dude who's in college smoking a joint, you know what I mean? I mean, let's weigh out here what's the danger here. And so when you start explaining that to people, that becomes, you know, that becomes the thing that they focus on. one thing, and I'm not saying you use it, but in America, if you really push on people's fears and not doing it to lie to them, but actually tell them the truth, they will vote for what makes sense. And a lot of people didn't think about marijuana that way. Everybody was just thought about the frying egg in the pan, which was this big advertisements we had all through the 80s and 90s. This is your brain on drugs with the frying egg in the pan. I mean, we'd go to, you know, or people just don't understand drugs. Like you go there and knock on a door and they'd be like, oh yeah, I know drugs. Those guys in that abandoned house, they're smoking weed all day. And we're like, no ma'am, that's not weed they're smoking, okay? Just let me tell you, the guys wigging out over there, they're smoking something else. So, marijuana was decriminalized in Grand Rapids in 2012. It was decriminalized in Detroit in 2011, Ann Arbor. Basically what's happened in Michigan is all through the mitten, that's what we call our state, we've had the big cities have decriminalized. And we know once we have decriminalization, the majority of Michigan citizens live in the decriminalized zone. And we know once we're there, we have the environment for legalization. That's what we've all been working on. Because, you know, after a while, you know, people really thought, especially in my community, I mean, I heard it, I'm not making this up. People was like, oh, the gates of hell will open, the demons will come out. I mean, I had to sit here and listen to this shit at doors, you know? But it didn't happen that way, right? And then people started feeling like, man, maybe I have some phobias that, you know, are not real. And they start seeing, I mean, first of all, especially in my city, if you live in a white community, marijuana decriminalization and criminalization are the same thing. You never feel it, you never notice it, it doesn't happen. So people start realizing, well, that's not so bad. I don't see crime going up, I don't see kids getting drugs. So last year, we had worked on it since 2015, but last year we went for marijuana legalization in our state. We put together a board of 16 members, everybody representing their own respective cities. We met in Lansing, which is our capital, once a month. We got a professional signature gathering firm. And so this, I always think, you know, the best stories, the best way you can learn is failing, right? I've always learned more from what I've failed at than what I've actually won at. So let me tell you this failure story to help you out if you want to go help in your community. I mean, it wasn't our fault. First, we started out, we had a lawyer, we had tons of lawyers. I was the only one of two non-lawyers on the board. You know, I felt like I was out of place. All I did was write the mailers. But we decided that we were going to write the best law we could, the most progressive, comprehensive marijuana law. Because now, you know, it used to be just trying to end the prison pipeline in America, but now it's different now. Now we have to keep Monsanto and these big corporations out of our state. And that's hard to do in a free market. And you can't do it totally, but you have to do what you can to allow the working man to be able to open up marijuana dispensaries, especially communities of lower income and communities of color. Because in my neighborhood, most people there could not get jobs. They don't graduate high school. They need the marijuana trade. So the marijuana trade becomes legal. That takes a lot of people out of the equation. And it's not fair because, you know, you look at my state, 40% of people have utilized marijuana. 20% do it a lot. It's not coming from 7-Eleven. So these companies or these communities are the ones producing it, and they should not be cut out of it once it goes legal. They should just be given a pass. Now we passed medical marijuana in 2008, so we had to try to keep along those lines, right? But there's a lot of loopholes in there. Has anybody here ever seen a medical marijuana card from the States? Here, I'll show you mine real quick. I'll pass it around. I know this isn't a Detroit audience, so it'll come back to me. You know? The man won't be knocking at my door. Okay, you pass it around. You see there's no picture on it, right? There's never pictures on it. That's how cheap they are. They just had to find a way to, you know, to say they were going to try to license it somehow. Now, if you look at the back of that, it says no caregiver. It means that I can grow 12 plants for myself. Now, I don't, because I can barely keep houseplants alive because I'm gone all the time. And I just rely on other people. But, you know, we wanted to shore up the loopholes of that law. Now, right now, you can have dispensaries, not on my side of the state, but on the other side. But if a federal task force, now you can pay your taxes, you can do everything right. I mean, you could be taking pictures with the mayor of your town. This has happened. This is not me making this up. And the federal task force, if they decide to, they will raid you. And when they raid you, they're not light and fluffy. They never are. American police are not light and fluffy. They break all your stuff. They rip everything down. They make sure to destroy everything. They're very militant when they take you down. So we want to shore up a lot of this. Try to keep people out of danger. Because there were a lot of people we've had in the state, mom and pop shops, who have done everything right. Everything right. And they find themselves with their kids taken away. All their assets forfeited. Their shop destroyed because when the guys come in, even though they put their hands up and they get on the ground, guys just start smashing the cases. They steal some of your stuff. God knows it's getting sold by them on the street. I mean, this is all real stuff. So, we put the law together. We thought this is going to be the best law ever. It keeps prices down for people under the market. It allows all communities to be part of it. It takes out those loopholes so that federal task force cannot take you down. So we brought it to the board of canvassers in our state. We did everything we could. But here's one thing we didn't see coming. We had a presidential election, right? And one president was a very extremist right-wing. He is now our president. And then we had a Democrat. And our state was a swing state. I don't know who knows about the Electoral College, but it doesn't matter popular vote in our country. You need certain states, certain designated people in states to vote for you. And if you don't, you still can lose even if everybody votes for you. Like Al Gore won the popular vote but lost the electoral election. Or the Electoral College. So basically, our state was one of the swing states. So we had a woman named Lisa Lyons, who's an ex-state rep, who was running for a Kent County clerk's seat. But before she got out, because she was lame duck, which means she couldn't run again, so she can basically destroy everything she can before she gets out, she decided to put a 180-day rule on signatures after we had been collecting for 4 months. Okay? So that's like me telling you all about a race and then saying go, and when you're halfway done with the race, I come up to you and be like, look, I changed the rules on this race. Okay? That's not fair, right? We thought we still collected, we still persevered. We said, you know what? We'll be able to sue the crap out of them. And we'll use America's endless appeal system, and we'll get somewhere, some judge will set precedents on us. So we collected them all. We turned them into the clerk. The clerk said, yep, there's 358,000 signatures here that are valid. But you didn't get with the 180-day rule, so whatever, I don't care what the people say. We're not talking these signatures were, 500, 600 days old. I mean, we're talking 250 days old, something. You know what I mean? So it essentially knocked us out. And I remember the board meeting. It was a really sad day. I mean, the day we turned these signatures in, and these are a lot of signatures. This takes a whole U-Haul truck. You got to carry them up on a dolly and put them at the clerk's door. I mean, I remember that day we were high-fiving each other, taking pictures, and then about a week later, you know what I mean? It looked like someone peed in their cornflakes. You know what I mean? We were just really sad, distraught, and we thought we were going to give up. We told ourselves we're going to give, there were people who quit the board. I'm not going to lie, I thought about quitting the board. It was a hard time. It was a volunteer job, But we decided to say, some battles are not won easily at all. And so you got to go back. You got to get back on the horse. You got to go. So we decided we were going to do it again. And we did. And we've been collecting signatures now for 180 days, keeping within their rules, which is not easy. This time, because it was 180 days, it took us $3 million to do it. This is not easy to do. People don't volunteer their time, I notice as I walk around here, people get along pretty well. People seem to sort of, they clap in unison, not in America. Most people, and then they'll come up and they'll say, oh, I'm not going to sign that because it doesn't do something that I think it should do. But there's no perfect resolution. I mean, we had a lot of people who come up to us who said, well, I'm not going to sign it. We actually have a group of marijuana advocates who pulled away from us in the state and are fighting us. They don't offer any solution. They just want to see us go down because they want to see marijuana unregulated in the state. Now that's great. I wish we could all just skip through a big-ass field of sticky icky, but that's never going to happen, okay? You have to regulate things. And we're in a market where we regulate alcohol, we regulate tobacco. It's unfair of us to say that we're not going to regulate marijuana, that we're going to let them have a competitive edge. And we need the tax money. Michigan is falling apart. We need the freeways, we need the schools. So, This whole time, this 180 days, we've been fighting against about 20% of the marijuana advocates, and I guarantee that's not just us. That'll happen everywhere. If you guys start to do things here, you will have buddies of yours who you think should go on, and they're going to say, no, I want to see it this way, or I want to see it that way, and they'll refuse to help it. I think that's just human nature sometimes. They call it the crawdad syndrome, right? Because you're fishing and you have a bunch of crawdads, and they don't help each other out. They pull each other back down into the bucket. We just have a tendency to do that in human nature, and that's what's been happening with us. So on top of fighting extreme right-wing government and the police unions and the prison guard unions, now we're fighting also marijuana people, and then we're fighting medical marijuana people who have been, you can pretty much be a drug dealer with a little bit of state protection, who don't want to see a regulated market. But we turned our signatures in last week, and we know that they're going to be validated because we validated every single one of them, and now we have to run the campaign. But we're at a 68% approval rating in Michigan, which even 10 years ago that would never happen. So, and we're doing the same thing that I did in Michigan, or decriminalized GR, the same thing they did in Detroit and Ann Arbor. We're not talking about marijuana. We're not presenting this. We actually call ourselves, even though I'm Michigan legalized, there's 3 different groups. We call ourselves a coalition to regulate marijuana like alcohol. We say it that way because we just know we need to rely on the 50 and up people who probably don't use marijuana, who probably are against it. And we're letting them know, let's be sensible. We're just going to regulate like alcohol. Alcohol is regulated very hard in our country. So we'll regulate marijuana the same way. And then it gives someone, you know, a way to, as soon as they even just hear our name, then they adequate it to, okay, well, you know, you can't drink a beer walking down the street in America. It's no potato law, you go to jail. You know, you can't drink past 2 o'clock and things of that nature. You can't mix gambling in certain areas with alcohol. So they think, okay, they regulate it, they tax it, perfect, right? And we're hoping this passes, because what's happening right now is everybody in Michigan thinks that there's a good thing that just happened called Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act. It was passed by our governor. It was actually passed bipartisan supported in our state house, that they wanted to regulate medical marijuana. But this is not a good thing, because what it does is, first, it's run by the group that actually licenses it through the state has been picked by marijuana lobbyists who want to see big business come through. If you want to grow 500 plants in our state right now through this act, which goes into effect on December 15th, you have to pay $5,000. You have to own a commercial real estate building. You also have to show that you have $150,000 to $200,000 in assets, which is very hard because our banking institutions will not do business with any kind of marijuana business. They won't even do it with us. Michigan Legalized had our bank account cut 2 months ago and had to go with another bank because they said we were taking money from drug dealers, which essentially we were, but not from anybody on the ground. Everybody was licensed, right? It wasn't like we were going down to Huggy Bear on the corner and taking, you know, 5K. That wasn't happening. But they made it sound like that. They really did. And they actually embarrassed us because it went to the press. And all of us on that board are professionals who work in our own respected cities and don't like to be, you know, look like we have some conspiracies going on. So it was an embarrassing thing for us. But, so you look at these high levels of the market that are going on right now in the state, and then you understand why MIFLA is what they call it, will not work. It sounds good on paper, and everybody's like, okay, we don't need legalization because we have an advanced medical marijuana. But it won't work. It's just going to bring in big business. When big business comes in, they go very radical. And then they're not, and then, you know, they also, under the law, can choose who they serve marijuana to. So you don't, most things in our government are regulated in our state. You can't choose not to sell a house to somebody because of who they are. You can't choose not to serve somebody. But under this law, you will be able to tell somebody whether you want to serve them marijuana or not. And then you can just see what kind of slippery slope that is, especially with our president who's in right now, and about 50% of our state that seems to reflect that kind of discriminatory nature. So that's why we're looking forward to legalization. We think it's going to pull everything back in our state, put it back on track, bring it back down so the common man can grow, can be part of a business that's going to revolutionize our tax industry in our state. And it'll help in the country in general because, first of all, we'll be the second largest state to legalize in the United States. We also, about 75% of Michigan shares a border with Canada, which tends to be very proactive with marijuana. So now we'll have a lot of room for to set precedents to the courts for international shipping, sharing borders, things of that nature when it comes to marijuana and how we transport it, who we can transport it to. We also allow 12 plants, which most places won't allow 12 plants of growth. Even in Portland or Oregon right now, you can only have 6 plants. We allow 12. Now you can't sell those 12 plants, okay? And you can't get funny with it. You can't give, your Uncle Steven 5 pounds of marijuana every month as a gift. It doesn't work that way. But we also have this new thing that's, I think is going to change the game, and that is a microbrew license. So where I come from, we call ourselves the Beer City. Michigan has really found an uptick in microbrews. They get special licensing and stuff like that, as long as and tax cuts, as long as they don't grow too large. So this microbrew license will allow people to start out small in their homes, build themselves up into a small commercial property, and then be able to keep themselves within reason. But under the microbrew license, you can still have a healthy living. You just cannot become huge. Now, if you choose to become huge, then you have all the options to raise up, to buy the licenses you need. But then you're going to be hit by certain tax codes that you were protected from before. But they don't have this in other states, so we're very interested in seeing how this works. I hear about, we should change our politicians. I heard that earlier. I saw she came in. I was going to talk about it a second. That's right. We should vote them out. We try to do that, but if you live in a city like mine, you can't vote people out. They're not going to take credit for marijuana, and you're not going to get them out. I mean, we've rarely got a Democrat elected in my city. It doesn't happen. And the Republicans we do have are very extreme. They're not moderates like what we used to have, where you can come to an agreement on things. They won't. Most of them are very fundamentalist. They use what they dictate as religious ideas to basically back up what they believe are facts. And we won't be able to get them out. Even in Detroit, where we actually have a very democratic government, they just passed. They just ended the moratorium so that they could have more dispensaries to bring out marijuana, and yet the city's still going against it. And a lot of that, though, I don't think is about worried about being elected or not elected. It's just there's a lot of money going around Michigan right now. And people know that the industry's going to change, so they're putting their money where they need to be. Whether they're buying off a politician, whether they're paying a lobbyist, they want to see it the way they want to come. I mean, our state government never wanted to see our bill. They definitely don't. And, we haven't won it yet. I could be up here crying next year. We might not win, but I'm guessing we will. But the fact is they wanted 16 licenses in our state. That's what they wanted, just like what Ohio wanted, and thank God Ohio voted it down. Because that makes it so, you have 16 licenses for 9.8 million people. Imagine how much that license costs. I don't know anybody in this room, I can't afford that. It could be a couple $1 million. And that's just for a license. That's not to start up the growth operation or the size of growth operation you would need in order to get a return on your investment like that. I mean, what I do for a day job now, I'm not in politics anymore besides what I do on my boards. I'm a real estate agent. And I do mostly commercial real estate. With the new medical marijuana laws coming in, I have a lot of clients who come to me and they're looking for growth spaces. Well, the return on investment on marijuana isn't a lot. Most of the plant's wasted. Now there's ways now we have in our state to make money back, like you can sell your waste to companies that further process it down and things that they can use it for clothes and plastics and things like that. But for you to make the money, even on the heightened funds they made, you need like a 10,000 square foot place, if not more. And you better hope that you don't get any kind of bugs or any type of fungus on your crop, or somehow your crop, turns all male, or something of that nature, because you're not going to get your money back. And since you have to invest so much money into it, that's a good way to become bankrupt. That's just so people can really understand. And in our city, we try to tell, or in our state, we try to tell people, the way you're going to make it in the marijuana market is not to have a dealer's mind. I got a lot of friends in my neighborhood, they got a dealer's mind. Forever they grew in, you know, basements or hidden rooms, and you know, they like to they have a cash business, so they like to drive a nice car, wear chains, or you know, try to, you know, hang out with the prettiest girls. I mean, that was their life. They don't think about it as a business. They think about it as clocking dollars in the park, at the skating rink, or wherever they're at. But like we told people, this is a business now. You're going to come in, you need to have quality control. You need to have lean manufacturing ideas put into your company. You need to understand where the industry's going and where it's been. These are a lot of things. So if you know anybody who's getting into the market or anything, and once policies pass more and more, especially in this country, you gotta let people know. The ones who are gonna make it are people who have a business-oriented mind and understand corporate business, because that's where it's gonna be. No longer is it gonna be growing, you know, in a couple fish tanks in your basement. It's just not gonna be that way. And I see it right now, about a month ago, we're in Lansing. You got a lot of guys up there, and they're trying to apply for their license, and I can tell right away they're probably not going to get it, and the ones who do, they're not going to make it. These guys are trying to grow, you know, on the back of an ice cream shop. They're not going to make it, and now they're going to have to compete with all levels of market: the small mom and pops, the mid-sized markets, and then large markets. Because there are guys coming in right now into our cities who have millions and millions of dollars and are willing to put it on the line. Most of these guys don't even care about marijuana. 5 years ago, they would have talked crap about marijuana, probably voted against it. But now, you know, they're day traders. They see where it's going, you know. They see where the money's going to go, and they want to capitalize on it. What's funny is we have a state lottery, and our lottery commissioner, this is a very, you know, very conservative Catholic man, and he's always been my friend. He's given money to certain things I've done. He called me about 3 months ago and wanted to talk to me about marijuana growing. I couldn't believe my ears. You know, and I'm thinking, I'm like looking around like, this guy got a wire, you know what I mean? Like, I don't grow marijuana. I have to like say that loud, you know, into his shirt. But yeah, he's a high-powered lawyer. He was on the lottery commission. He made a lot of money doing and he's got a lot of very conservative people who cared little about marijuana, but they de-invested in whatever assets they had, and now they're going to invest in marijuana. And so you have a whole new group coming to the table, and that's what people don't see. And that's not Michigan, that's not the United States. That's going to be here too. Always remember that. The people who grow now, the people who are in it now, they're not going to be necessarily. You're going to be competing with everybody. The person who says they hate marijuana now is going to love it once the millions of dollars come to the table. I mean, that's one thing we have with voters in our state too. We have a lot of hypocritical people. I know people right now who have medical marijuana licenses. They smoke marijuana. And if you went up to them and talk about marijuana, they'd be like, I don't smoke marijuana. Marijuana's bad. Actually, that guy smokes marijuana. He's a loser. I'm not lying. It's become such, it happened during Prohibition too. Everybody during Prohibition in our country didn't drink, but they drank. We still now, in many homes across the United States, there's hidden bookshelves, there's safes. People drank. The president drank during that time. Same with marijuana. You got a lot of people who utilize marijuana who will probably vote against it in our state, or who will chastise the next guy for it. So it's just, you know, we're just seeing a very weird environment in our state. And I'm just hoping that we can make it in November 2018. And I really just want to thank everybody for having me here. And if you guys want to go on our Facebook and like Michigan Legalized, even if you can't vote for us, pass it around. I mean, we're very excited to be able to come to this conference to speak at an international level on this, and that we're being recognized. Because we're really just a small group, and everybody needs to remember that. It's not going to be a giant, you know, the revolution won't be televised. It's not going to be a giant group of people when you pass marijuana legislation. There's going to be a few of you at the table, and everybody's going to treat you as an outcast, and most people are going to treat you like you're a nobody until you make it. So don't expect to see every big wig and senator or elected official and wealthy person to come to the table and help you, because it's not going to happen. So I can take any questions anybody has. We had really passionate questions before. This drug conference needs more drugs.
Recent Gallup poll said that 60% of Americans actually approve of legalizing weed. And yet, Princeton study a long time ago said that there is no correlation between what the Americans want and what policies are introduced.
Yeah, Big Tobacco came on board because, you know, they had the idea of like, if you can't beat them, join them. But alcohol, yeah, definitely. Not the microbrews, not the people who make the Founders beer and all the small things we have, because they have about the same like mine. They're not going to get the competition. If you drink craft beer, you're going to keep drinking craft beer. But yeah, the big alcohol companies, we see the push. And then that's one thing that people need to understand too when you're coming to marijuana, like you said, the corporations, right? People don't think of the peripheral markets you're going to have, the complementary markets. Like I just heard on Michigan radio the other day about how Taco Bell is poised because they know their sales are going to go up exponentially. Peyton Manning, he's a big football star, just retired. He bought 20 Papa John pizzerias in Colorado the year before it legalized because he knew he was going to make bank. But there's other people who know that they're going to lose out. And sometimes you don't even think about that, like you said. And so they're going to give money to the lawmakers to pass the policies they need. That's why Ohio had the oligopoly, and that's why Michigan tried to do it. No, we've seen it. We've seen the pushback. We haven't seen it from the, well, I can't say we haven't seen it from pharmaceutical companies because I can't trace all the money. You can get the super PACs in our state, and I don't know where it comes from. Like I know money's coming from the federal level because we barely got money. We just got done paying off just to keep the lights on. And now we got people in Detroit putting up these pictures of little kids saying the kids are going to smoke more marijuana. And there's like 20 billboards. Now where are they getting this money from? It's not coming from you or me. It's not coming from a mom and pops. It's big money right there. Any other questions? Come on, there's got to be another question, man. We got a big passionate argument with the last one. Come on, man, ask.
How would you define the drug policy of Donald Trump?
Sarah, I'm sorry, I can't help my name.
How would you describe the drug policy of Donald Trump?
I mean, you know, I'm like, you know, I don't agree with my president. I'm not going to sit here up and down. I mean, the fact is there's a lot of hypocrisy in the White House right now. So how can you define what he says? He says one thing, goes the other. Actually, at the DPA conference that some of us were at in Atlanta, that's how I met. That's how I'm here because I met people from your movement here. They had an interesting talk that basically said the one thing he hasn't been hypocritical on is marijuana. Like he said some mean things about it, but he also believes in state rights. And one thing, you know, he's not the smartest president we've ever had. Okay? And the fact of the matter is this. The crazy right-wing, alt-right rednecks that voted for him, because it wasn't me, it wasn't my neighborhood, so I guarantee that. They would have beat you up voting for him in my neighborhood. It was these people, they might be crazy on one end, but they also believe in state rights, right? So what are you going to do? It's a double-edged sword. You need them to keep your base, right? But you're going to come in and tell us that we can't do it? Because there's a lot of, like right now, there's guys in Michigan, right? Now, my city's different than rural Michigan, okay? My city and Detroit and all that, we're just like here, big city, hip-hop clubs, all that, right? But you go out to rural Michigan, you get the rebel flags and the Tea Party flag, and these guys carry more weapons than you've ever seen in your life. I mean, they carry assault rifles when they go to the grocery store. And they will be there preparing for like the federal government to come in and tell them something. And these are both for Trump. So what are you going to do? You're going to tell them? And that's one thing, that's the great thing about marijuana, right? I've never seen people get along so well in my life. Okay, there are people I work with that just legalized. Now we get along. I used to hate these people. I used to like have to like stay away from them so I didn't vomit. We don't agree on anything else. But that's the great thing about marijuana. We all come together, right? I mean, sadly, these, you know, neo-Nazis that are out in the rural area that vote for Trump and, you know, basically don't agree with me on anything, they do agree with me on marijuana, and they vote for him. So if Donald Trump, you know, that's where it comes in. You can't come in and start telling states they can't legalize because now you're going to erode your base. And these guys are scary. These guys have a lot of weapons. I mean, they have militias with drones right now who feel there's another American Civil War coming. So I think that the federal government, to answer your question, I mean, they might talk tough and all that, but they're going to shut up. They're not trying to have that, you know what I mean? They're not, no one's trying to deal with that. Those guys outgun the police. So, yeah, I don't know, you know, Trump, I will have to say the one thing, I hate to ever give that guy props for anything, but the fact that he put a focus on opiate addiction in America is actually a decent thing. I will say that. Right now, in my city, you can get heroin easier than get anything. Marijuana, beer, we have people dying all over. I mean, you know, that's one thing you can tell, you know, in America we can use on people too, right? People are like, oh, our kids are gonna get marijuana. No. You know what the two easiest things to get in my neighborhood is, in my city? Heroin's first, and an unlicensed firearm, then marijuana. There's times before where you can go down the street and guys are trying to sell you a gun or some heroin, you're like, I just want some weed. You guys have weed? Where's the weed at? You know? So, you know, I'm telling you. Yeah, when people, and we're going to use that doors this fall, you know? When people are like, my kids are going to get, well, no. Your kids can get an unlicensed firearm and some heroin way easier than they can get some weed. They keep telling them to bet the bank on that.
Do we have the last question? Anybody? From the corner.
Are you benefiting of so many other states shifting? For example, I talked to somebody with came from Nevada, worked with marketing with marijuana, and then they sold out in a few days, and then they have to bring it across the state because it was no more legal weed in Nevada. So then a conservative governor had to declare a state of emergency to bring it to Colorado and different states. Does the whole environment help you?
It sure does. 8 states, 1 territory. You know, one thing with us is we're the battleground for 2018. When we fall in the Midwest, the whole Midwest falls. I mean, I don't know who's really familiar with America, but I'm in the heartland. You know, like the yeehaw, everybody, you know, like that doesn't happen over here. No, it does. You know? And once it falls, and that's why they're fighting us so hard there, the federal and the state levels, because yes, we're benefiting from the legal precedents set in the, you know, appeals courts and Supreme Courts of other states that have allowed us to have the law we have. Also just the fact that people are cool with it, but also, yeah, when we win this battle, and that's why I think we're so passionate about it, we win this battle here, the heartland falls. I'm talking Ohio, Illinois, you know, all these guys, I mean, you know, they get out, they're already mad. It's one thing that, you know, guys and girls have married each other, now we got pot, you know what I mean? It's like, I mean, they don't care about weapons for some reason, but they care about everything else. So,
if you want to give us, like, for our work in Norway, if you want to give us like 5 short, like, top advices for how we're going to go forward, or what we should be aware of in the process, what would that be?
yeah, I'll just recap real quick. First,
Yeah.
lawyers,
Give us a short recap.
right? Second, don't talk about marijuana. Stop talking about it. Talk about the money. Talk about the people's lives lost. Talk about the economic impact. Third, know that, you know, I'm not saying that anybody in this room, but know even people might be in this group and others, you might end up fighting them. Not physically, but in the courts. It's happened to us. We used to be more together. Fourth, if you lose the first time, do it again. You might lose this. And when people say, oh, poor me, I know there's old people in this room that have been losing a lot. I mean, we've had people who've been losing since the 60s in Michigan. I'm lucky, you know what I mean? I've only lost once, they've lost 7 times. And I think like fifth, I don't know how elections work here, but in America, it's money. And I'm sure you need some sort of money here. So you're gonna need money. So don't concentrate, I guess that goes back to don't concentrate on winning people over, you probably won't win. Concentrate on getting the dollars and hitting those doors, knocking on people's doors, talking to people, getting people to the polls, which is probably not a problem here, but that's the biggest thing. Don't spend 2 years and all your money trying to convince someone you'll never convince. Just get the money and get the people to the polls.
That's great. Give it up for